So a very warm Jai Bhim to all of you. And today we will be commencing a new course on Baba Saheb Ambedkar and Constitution and Constitutionalism. So as a part of our ongoing efforts to make available the thoughts of Baba Saheb Ambedkar and how they relate to us today, we conceptualized various programs, and as a part of that, this is what we are going to do in the course of coming 6 weeks. We are going to look at the Constitution and constitutionalism, and I thought that what framework we should adopt in order to talk about the Constitution and constitutionalism. And I came across this very fascinating book plan by Baba Saheb Ambedkar, where he himself wanted to write a book on explaining, elaborating the Constitution of India. And this book plan is available to us, and it's in this volume. If anybody is interested, they can look into this volume, and it has got. I will put it in the groups about the reference to the book plan and the introduction that Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar himself provided. So that gives a very good framework to talk about the Constitution. So let me begin with the presentation. And yes, share. So this is the presentation for today. So we will be talking about, of course, the Constitution and constitutionalism, and the subtitle that Baba Saheb Ambedkar himself gave for this presentation was the Constitution of India, an exposition of its principles. And today we are going to look at, in the session number 1, the beginnings and the growth of Constitution. So let's begin. I would like to dedicate these 6 sessions to this great man who, was killed in the police custody. It's the custody and death, defending the Constitution of India. He is Somnath Suryavanshi. He was in the final year of his law degree, and he was killed in the recent events at Parbhani, where the people, Ambedkarites, were defending the Constitution. So I would like to dedicate all these 6 sessions to this great man, Somnath Suryavanshi, who is no more with us, but he has shown us the way as to how we can fight for our rights till our death. So this is just in the memory of brother Somnath Suryavanshi. And this is, as I said, is going to be the study of the Constitution. Just give me 1 minute. This is going to be the analytical study of the Constitution. So we are not going to go by article, and Dr. Baba Ambedkar didn't propose in this book to go article by article, but this is what his aim was, that this is an analytical study of the Constitution. So we'll be studying the Constitution analytically, and it aims to give an objective picture of the Constitution and to set it in contrast with the provisions of the constitutions of other countries. So this is what will be doing in the course of our sessions: compare the Constitution of India and the principles, underlying principles therein, with what's happening in the constitution of other countries. That's what Baba Ambedkar wanted to look into and study the Constitution. So this is the framework for the upcoming week, and the first, as we are beginning today, will be the beginnings and the growth of Constitution. This is what we are going to do today, but I'm going to do it in a way that will put Baba Saheb Ambedkar in the forefront of the Constitution making. And then in the second session, we'll be looking at the principles underlying the constitutional system. Very interesting, very important. And I think we can even exhaust the 6 sessions studying the principles underlying the constitutional system, but we do not have that luxury of time. So in the second session, I'm going to deal with this very important part of our studies. And in the third, the organs of the state, very important. And in the fourth, we'll be looking at the union and the states, of course, analytically. And in the fifth, the state and the citizens, very interesting, important topic that we all need to look into. And in the sixth, I thought that, we'll be looking at working of the Constitution over its, 75 years. And of course, particularly from the point of view of the principles, underlying principles of the constitutional system. So this is the framework that we are going to have in the coming sessions. So to begin with, as I said, the beginnings and the growth of the constitution, I'm going to use Baba Sahib's introduction, which is available, and based on that, we'll be venturing into the constitution, the nature and the scope of constitutional law, and this is what is our going to be our framework. And I will reiterate what is going to be our framework. We'll not just focus on the individual articles. We know that there are now more than 444 articles in the constitution. In the initial constitution, when it was drafted, there were 395 articles and 8 schedules. And we are not going to look at the individual articles per se them. And what we are going to look at, we are going to look at the underlying principles, so that once we have the grasp over the principles, it's not difficult to understand the arrangements of the articles. And we will be focusing on the analytical study of the constitution and set it in contrast with the provisions of the constitutions of other countries. And there are four heads, as I told you, that Baba Ambedkar himself mentioned. And based on those four heads that Baba Ambedkar has mentioned, we'll be looking at the articles, and the articles will be assembled according to the principles. So we will not be following article by article wise discussion. That can be useful, but it will not give us the analytical tool to make sense of them. So this is what Baba Ambedkar mentioned, what is meant by a constitution and what is the nature and the scope of the constitutional law. So this is the definition that Baba Ambedkar has provided us based on what Professor Mac21 has elaborated. So the definition of the constitution, of course, there was, according to Baba Ambedkar himself, there was a parliamentary democracy at the time of the Buddha. And Kanelal Hazra has written the book, The Constitution of the Buddhist Sangha. The Vinay Pitaka is considered to be the constitution of the Buddhist Sangha. And we can go back in the history, but Baba Ambedkar has given us this definition. In the Roman Empire, the word in its Latin form became the technical term for acts of legislation by the emperor. So whatever the emperor legislated, which it was called the constituento, the constitution. And from the Roman law, the church borrowed it and applied it to ecclesiastical regulations for the whole church or some particular ecclesiastical province. From the church, or possibly from the Roman law books themselves, the term came back into use in the latter Middle Ages as applicable to secular enactment of the time. So from the religious enactment, it came to become the secular enactment of the time. And for centuries, the word constitution always meant a particular administrative enactment, much as it had meant to the Roman lawyers. The word was used to distinguish such particular enactment from the consuetudo or ancient custom. It was not until 1610 the constitution came to have the modern meaning, according to which it means the scheme of civil government as defined by law. In other words, the constitution is nothing but the legal framework of the state. So this is the way Baba Ambedkar defines, based on what Professor McWin has given the definition of, and the history of the word constitution. It's the legal framework of the state. So I think we have to understand this word constitution in its historical context, as Baba Ambedkar does it in his research in different fields. He brings history into play to explain the terms. So this is how Baba Ambedkar has explained that the constitution is the legal framework of the state. Then he moved on to the further definition. And after 1610, 100 years later, the word constitution is seen to have taken on an additional and special meaning which goes much beyond the legal framework of the state. So this is how the word constitution is evolving. It is no more applied just to the legal framework of the state. This is well indicated by Bolingbroke, who, writing in 1733, said, this is what he said: by constitution, we mean, whenever we speak with propriety and exactness, that assemblage of laws. It's not just the framework, legal framework of the state, but it's also the assemblage of laws institutions, and customs derived from certain fixed principles of regions, directed to certain fixed objects of public good that compose the general system according to which the community has agreed to be governed. You see how this definition of the constitution has been, enhanced. This is well before the American Constitution came into being. 1776, that's the formation of the American war of Revolutionary War, and then the American Constitution, the first constitution as if in the modern times to come into being. Much before that, this is how Bolingbroke is defining the constitution as, the community has agreed to be governed. The generals composes the general system according to which the community has agreed to be governed. These are all very interesting definitions, and we need to bear these definitions in mind, which are collected by Baba Ambedkar. And of course, the great Thomas Penn, and who contributed so much to the constitution making indirectly, and the French Revolution and the American Revolution, and again, his books, Common Sense and The Right of the Man, they became the basis of the constitution. Where the founding fathers of America talked about the pursuit of happiness, and the words and all, they have the larger meanings in the writings of Thomas Penn. And this meaning of the word constitution was evidently brought out by Thomas Penn, who argued thus that a constitution is not the act of a government, but of a people. Remember the word in the preamble, we the people. And the constitution is not just an act of a government, but of a people constituting a government. We the people of India constitute, so the people constitute a government, and a government without a constitution is power without right. You see, this is a very, very deep, meaning. The definition has got very deep meaning. As I said that, we can talk a lot about these single concepts, but given the paucity of time, I'm just going to limit myself to bringing out very important dimensions of what it means by constitution, as Baba Ambedkar has explained in this book that he has planned to write, but he couldn't write. Maybe there might be
Definitely.
here. So you see, this is a constitution is not the act of a government, but of a people constituting a government, and a government without a constitution is power without right. So that is the importance of the constitution in the modern times. If there is no constitution, there may be power, but it is without rights because it is not constituted by the people. And we are going to see as to how the people of India were involved in the constitution of this country, and India was constituted by the people of this country. So, what is the nature and the scope of the constitutional law? This is the question that Baba Ambedkar raises, and he talks about two kinds of states, like the scope of the constitutional law all over the world where democracy prevails includes all matters relating to the right claimed by the state against its citizens. Very important. That is one, to make a law binding on all. So you cannot make just law, for in an exclusive sense. It has to be bound by all. To enforce the law, to interpret the law, and the rights claimed by the citizens against the state. So this is what is the scope of the constitutional law in the democracy. And whenever there is a composite state, like federal states, like there is a center and the state governments, and then the scope of the constitutional law would, in addition to those matters, include matters pertaining to the interrelations between the central polity and other polities, making up the federation, legal, executive, and financial. So, all these principles we are going to see in the constitution. But suffice here is to say that, the constitutional law has such a scope and such a nature, in the two different political systems like democracy and, in the federal state where there is a center and there are the federal units. So what is the place of the constitutional law in the legal jurisprudence? So Baba Ambedkar cites Professor Holland, calls it a part of the public law of the country. It's not the private law, of course. And he says that no one can deny that this is the correct view. His reasoning logically leads to that conclusion. Law as an enforceable rule of conduct relates to rights. So law, relates to rights. This is an insight we have to bear in mind. So law has always to do with the rights. Baba Ambedkar was a very, very, insightful person in the legal manner. He taught law, he practiced law, not just the constitutional law. He was the expert in the constitutional law. And I'm going to show you how he was expert in the constitutional law, but he was also much more than that. He was a philosopher, he was a legal thinker, and this word is very pithy. Law as an enforceable rule of conduct relates to rights. Isn't it? So the rights are at the center of it. When it relates to rights as between the citizen of the same state, it's called the municipal law. It's very, very interesting definitions. When it relates to two different states, it's called international law. So there are international laws in place and there are municipal laws within the country which are in place. And the municipal law of a state falls into two categories. One is called the private law and the other is called the public law. And rights which may be enforced by one citizen against another fall under what is called the private law. And rights which the state assert against citizens to enforce against itself falls under the public law. So I'm not going to go into much of the technicalities. I wanted to just show you that, the constitutional law, because if we want to study the constitution analytically, we have to understand the scope and the nature of the constitutional law and the enforceability of the rights. It's a tongue twisting word. And the constitutional law is a branch of the public law. That's what Baba Ambedkar defines it as. And this is how the school lectures will be arranged according to the heads given by Baba Ambedkar, so that we understand the constitutional law as the public laws of India, and their scope and their nature is the enforceability of the rights. And I think unless we understand this conception, the analytical nature of the book that Baba Ambedkar has planned, and we are going to try to reconstruct what Baba Ambedkar had not finished in the course of these 6 weeks. I just wanted to bring to you this introduction by Baba Ambedkar, and this is how Baba Ambedkar has talked about the principles underlying the constitutional system. So these are the 3 principles underlying the constitutional system. I'm going to go into that in the latter course of 4 sessions. The principle of democracy, Baba Ambedkar has talked a lot about democracy, a lot about democracy. And India is a democratic republic. It's not anarchy, or it's not autocracy, it's not dictatorship. It is not, there are 2 forms of democratic system, the parliamentary or the presidential form of the democratic system, which we are going to look into in the coming sessions, and various conceptions of democracy. And we can conduct a whole sort of a course on Baba Ambedkar and democracy. There's so much Baba Ambedkar has written and talked about democracy. The second principle is federalism. There is a strong union, but there are the states, and the principle of federalism is very, very important. We cannot just make our center very strong and govern all the states just like that, because the federal principle is very important. That's the basic feature of constitution. And of course, the separation of the power. This is what is the essence of the constitution. We cannot concentrate the power in the hands of a single organ of the state policy. We cannot do that. We have to have the separation of powers, because that's how the separation of power is very important, because that's how you maintain the checks and balance on the various organs of the government. So this is what we are going to study in the upcoming session, where I'm going to dive deep into the principles of democracy, principle of federalism, and the principle of separation of power. And then in the third session, I'm going to talk about the organs of the state, where we'll be looking at the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. And of course, on the federal level and on the union level. That's what we are going to look into. And then in the third session, the fourth session, the union and the state. Very interesting. So what is the legislative relationship between the union and the state? Administrative relations between the union and the state, financial relations, and the emergency relations. Very interesting. This is going to be a very interesting journey. And as we are going to look at the analytical, we are going to study analytically. We don't have to be bothered about the articles. The articles will eventually come, and they will become very easy for us. We don't have to get daunted by so many 400 odd articles of the constitution. Once we grasp the principles, we know how to play with the articles. So in the final session, penultimate session, the state and the citizen, very important. So we are going to look at the rule of law, right to personal freedom, right to freedom of speech, right of public meeting, right of association, right of free movement, and right to hold property. All important rights and all given in the Constitution of India. But we have to understand the principles as to what do we mean by the rule of law? What do we mean by the personal freedom? What do we mean by the freedom of speech? What do we mean by the right of public meetings? These seemingly simple words like right of public meeting is denied in the authoritarian state. In China, you cannot have the associations. As in India, there are so many associations, so many NGOs, so many civil society organs, so many political parties. It's not one party system. You can have as many political parties. That's a right of association and right of free movement. You can move anywhere in this country. That was not the case before the constitution came into being. You cannot just simply go in any other state and right to hold property. Now it is gone, but we have to look at the principle behind the right to hold property. So this is what is going to be the heart of our sessions to come. And in the final session, I'm going to just look at the working of the constitution, of course, the analytical way. So let's move on to the piece of it, the history, the constitutional history of India. And we can see very clearly that Baba Saheb Ambedkar has played his role beginning with the mini constitution of 1919 and all the way up to the democratic constitution of 1950. So after the mutiny of 1857, the Queen's proclamation of 1858 transferred the power to the British Parliament from the East India Company to govern British India. So, the Parliament became the ruler of India, not the East India Company. That is 1858. And from 1858 onwards, the Constitutional History of India veered towards some kind of responsibility towards representation to the Indians. And this is very crucial development in the constitutional history of India, that during the World War I, the British needed India's support in the war. They came up with the August Declaration of 1917, promising Indians the right of self-government progressively and gradually. Before 1917, if you ask for the self-government, it was considered to be the sedition. But after 17, you can ask for the self-government, and the self-govern, the right to self-govern was given to the Indians progressively, as we can see from the Constitution of India. And then, there is a declaration in the context of this 1917 declaration. The Southborough Commission came and Baba Saheb Ambedkar submitted the evidence to the Southborough Commission in 1917, and he talked about democracy in a length. He talked about the rights of the depressed classes at length in 1917. And as a result of that, Montagu-Chelmsford Reform came in 1919, also known as the Government of India Act 1919. This act gave some powers to the Indians, and it was also decided that the Act of 1919 will also be reviewed after 10 years. And the untouchables, of course, got seats in the Montfort reforms of 1990. That's how, in the Bombay presidency, Baba Saheb Ambedkar became the part of the Bombay Legislative Council. And, 2 seats nominated, 2 persons were nominated from the repressed classes. So this is the a brief history, and we will continue. And as I told you that, the Montfort Commission reforms was to be reviewed. And to review that, Simon Commission came to India to review the Government of India Act 1919. And the Simon Commission, it toured all over the India, and it submitted a white paper. And in order to discuss the white paper, the round table conferences were held in UK. And Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar participated in all the rounds of the round table, 3 rounds. And Gandhi went to the second round, and we know what happened in the second round table conference. And what happened in the second round table conference, we are still bearing the brunt of what has happened in aftermath. And Baba Saheb Ambedkar has argued for the representation of the depressed classes, and he argued for the separate electorate. And his argument was accepted, and the separate electorate were allotted to the depressed classes. But Gandhi sat fast unto death, and there is an infamous Pune Pact was signed, and we lost, all the rights to represent our own community. And thus the untouchables were disfranchised by Gandhi and Congress. Now, you keep these words in your mind, separate electorate, because they are very important words which are going to come again and again in the history. Why I'm going to bringing this? Because, constitution writing is nothing new to the Indians. And as we have seen, as I'm showing you, that Baba Saheb Ambedkar was the part and parcel of the constitution making, and the Simon Commission and the RTC led to the Government of India Act 1935, very elaborate act, which is called the New Constitution of India. 1935 Act was called the new Constitution of India. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar has talked about the adult franchise. He talked about, the rights of the people. He talked about democracy. And, he was much more ahead than the so-called Congress nationalist of the time. And in 1935, for the first time, elections were held in India with the limited franchise. There was not universal adult franchise. Not everybody can vote. And there was a criteria that if an untouchable can sign, they were entitled to vote. There were different ways by which we were, conditions by which you can be a part of the electorate. Not everybody was included in the electorate. There was a limited franchise. And in 1937, there was an election, and we know the result. Heavily successful party in the Bombay presidency, the Independent Labour Party. But I'm not going to look at that because that's not our topic today. Now, what happened after the World War II? And I would like you to bear these facts and things are in your mind, because 1935 Government of India Act declared that the scheduled castes were the minorities. Just like the Sikhs, just like the Muslims, the scheduled caste were the minorities. But after the World War II, the position of the government changed. The Labour Party came into power. And we could have expected justice from the Labour Party. But what happened? The mockery of the time or history is this, that Baba Sambhagar had to plead to all the people in the Labour Party, Conservative Party, and what he did is remarkable. I'm going to show you what he did in order to make the constitution a representative constitution. Without him, his interference, I don't know what kind of a constitution India would have had. But this is to bear in mind that on 15th March 1946, the British Prime Minister Clement Attlee, the Labour Prime Minister, acknowledged India's right to attain full independence within or even without the British Commonwealth. So that is the date on which it was decided that there will be a transfer of power to the Indians. So it's not that 15th August 1947 is the date. It was to take place after a certain time, but the British government, was in a hurry to hand over the power, and we know what happened as a result of that. Baba Ambedkar was very puzzled. He said one day they might explain why they, just left India just like that. There was a lot of discussion in the British Parliament, and I'm going to show you how Baba Ambedkar influenced the discussion in the British Parliament. And this British Prime Minister, he acknowledged that India will be given full independence. And then Clement Attlee sent a delegation of 3 cabinet ministers, which is called in the history known as the Cabinet Mission Plan. And there were Sir Stafford Cripps, he was there. A.V. Alexander, very interesting figure coming from the downtrodden British class system. And Lord Pethick Lawrence, a very strange figure, a very different character. So Baba Ambedkar's genius is to understand this all mentality of all these people. So he wrote a letter to Alexander, appealing to his background. He wrote to Lord Pethick Lawrence, and they were all member of parliaments in the parliament, in the British Parliament, and they came to discuss with Indian leaders on the spot. It reached New Delhi on 24th March 1946. On 5th April 1946, Cabinet Mission interviewed 2 representatives of the minority communities, Dr. Baba Ambedkar and Master Tara Singh. And this memorandum that Baba Ambedkar has submitted on 5th April 1946 on the behalf of all India Scheduled Caste Federation, I invite everybody to go through it. So it's a great piece of writing. And this memorandum, Baba Ambedkar submitted all India Scheduled Caste Federation, which included these elements you have to keep in mind. He asked for the separate electorate because he proved that under joint electorate, we have no power. We are disenfranchised. Isn't it? We were at the mercy of the caste Hindus to get our representation. They chose who will be elected among the scheduled castes. And he talked about the adequate representation in legislature, in executive, and in the public services. And he talked about the new and separate settlement. Don't think that this separate settlement was not viable. Baba Ambedkar talked about the shifting of the entire village population to the new location. He said there is a plenty of land in this country and we can do what South Africa did with the Bantus, give them the separate settlements. And this is very interesting ideas. And the way Baba Ambedkar goes into these ideas in this beautiful memorandum submitted to the Cabinet Mission Plan on the behalf of the All India Scheduled Caste Federation is very analytical written, and it's a very rational document. And this is the plea Baba Saheb Ambedkar made to the cabinet mission plan. And of course, Wewell was present there. And on 16th May 1946, the cabinet mission announced state papers. They announced a state paper which gave the mandate for number one, formal union of India with three groups of provinces. And we know Baba Saheb Ambedkar after criticized these three groups of the provinces. A plan for interim government. There has to be interim government and the formation of constituent assembly. But this, and the demand of the scheduled caste was not accepted at all. So that was a crisis. Why I'm telling you this story? Because these stories are very important to understand the constitution making, because we are talking about the beginnings and the growth of the constitution. So we talked about the historical definition. Now we are talking in terms of the Indian context, what is happening. So this is what is happening. And Baba Saheb Ambedkar said that India do not need constituent assembly. That was his stand. Very interesting stand. He said that there are basically two questions. One is a constitutional question, which can be resolved by looking at the Government of India Act 1935. He said that the government can appoint a legal expert and a member from a Muslim and Hindu community. That time India was United India, and they can decide based on the terms of reference of the 1935 Act the constitutional question. But he said the much more important question is a communal question as to who will get what. What will the Muslims get? What will the Sikhs get? What will be the scheduled caste get? And the Gandhi stand and the Congress stand since 1932 was to deny the minority status to the scheduled caste. They were ready to do anything. They wanted to make the scheduled caste the part and parcel of the Hindu caste. And Baba Saheb Ambedkar had warned that if you persist on that, if we become Muslims, what will happen? The Congress will be null and void. Just imagine the situation. Great statesmanship of Baba Saheb Ambedkar. This 1946 is such an important year for us to study. So, how Baba Saheb Ambedkar worked towards getting the representation for the scheduled caste. So, as the All India Scheduled Caste Federation could not win seats in 1946 election due to faulty electoral system, there were the primary and the final election. And Baba Saheb Ambedkar has proved that the Congress got only 4% of the scheduled caste votes. But their candidates won because, in the general constituency, all the caste Hindus voted for the Congress party candidate. And we know that Yogendra Nath Mandal helped Baba Saheb Ambedkar to get elected in the Constituent Assembly from the Bengal. And, it has the history of its own. And on 9th December 1946, the Constituent Assembly met for the first time and it was boycotted by the Muslim League. Nehru moved an objective resolution which was debated in the Constituent Assembly. Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar made an epoch-making speech on 17 December 1946. And I would say it changed the fate of India. In other courses, we are going to look into that speech. But I just wanted to highlight some of the points. And in that speech, Baba Saheb Ambedkar emphasized on the unity of India, justice for all, and more importantly, plead for peace instead of war within India. And he was already known for his vast knowledge of the constitutional law. He played a leading and critical role in writing the Constitution of India. But, what I'm going to talk about is how Baba Saheb Ambedkar, had, because the British with Congress decided not to consider the scheduled caste as a minority, and that was a crisis. So Baba Saheb Ambedkar launched a political mission to England in 1946. He went to England and he met Churchill, he met Attlee, he met hundreds of people. And, because of his diplomacy, because of his negotiation in the parliament, Churchill favored that, if there is no representation from the Muslims and the scheduled caste, the constitution will be meaningless. That's what, Churchill said in the British parliament. And, Baba Saheb Ambedkar was fighting for the scheduled caste representation in the Viceroy Executive Council. He wanted 3 seats. And the Congress and the British, because after 1946, the Congress became the de facto ruler of this country. De facto, isn't it? So, they offered a seat to Jagjivan Ram. They didn't accept Baba Saheb's nomination. N. Shivraj, he said, I don't want it. You give it to N. Shivraj. And the opposition of Gandhi and Congress to Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar's entry in the Constituent Assembly. Now some of the people saying that it was because of Gandhi, Baba Saheb Ambedkar entered into Constituent Assembly. The facts are different. Opposition of Gandhi and Congress to the Baba Saheb Ambedkar entry in the Constituent Assembly. I'm going to show you how it was, and to the scheduled caste and Yogendra Mandal and Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar's victory in Bengal and direct action on the ground. Our people had launched a direct satyagraha on the ground in 1946. So constitution or terrorism and communism. So when Baba Saheb Ambedkar met the cabinet mission plan on 5th April 1946, a note was submitted. And this is a very interesting. The statement is very interesting. What Baba Ambedkar said, that he was on trial with his followers for efficacy of the constitutional method, because the scheduled caste were disillusioned by the British. The scheduled caste were disillusioned by the Congress. And because of this present disillusion is driving my people to terrorism and communism. And he says that he is on trial with them for efficacy of the constitutional method. It's very important to bear these sentences of Baba Ambedkar. And in 1946, in November 15th, he said, I would act in a constitutional manner to further our cause. After all, constitutional means are exhausted. We shall then consider what other means we can adopt. Why I am bringing this? Because these days people are raising the discourse that the constitution and the constitutionalism is not helping us. And Baba Ambedkar is insisting that we have to follow the constitutional methods. We cannot follow the bloody methods. Now, even the constitution is sabotaged when Baba Ambedkar was alive. And, his famous statement that, I will burn the constitution. But I will show you that, he just made that rhetorical statement. He was not very much serious about the statement, because, he has put so much of his efforts in drafting the constitution, in making the principles of democracy, federalism, and, the separation of power as a part of the Indian constitution. So you see, these are very interesting. And the first constitution came into being because of the people. It didn't came from the aristocratic class. It's the French Revolution, when the mob, the people, the masses turned the National Assembly into a constituent assembly. And that's what happened in UK, in USA. And that is what was to happen in India, that it was the people who would constitute the constitution. So you see, I'm just going to put this thing to up. Clement Attlee, on recommendation of cabinet plan, just awarded 1 seat out of 14 to the scheduled caste in the Viceroy Executive Council. So this is what Baba Ambedkar has said to the Prime Minister. He said that I wanted 3 members from the scheduled caste out of 14. Some compromise, agreed for 2, but the intergovernment led by the Congress party has put forward a recommendation for just 1 scheduled caste member. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. So, they have been, hell-bent on breaking the promise made to the scheduled caste. So I told you that, in the month of May, Baba Ambedkar has telegraphed Churchill, who was the leader of the opposition party. And this is very interesting. So what this cable said, what Baba Ambedkar said to Churchill and the member of the opposition party. He wrote, the future of the untouchables is in the darkness. We depend on you for safeguarding their rights. Churchill was a statesman, a very learned man. He understood the problem of the untouchables. He understood the total mind of Baba Ambedkar. He loved Baba Ambedkar, I would say, because he invited him at his home, and they spent an entire day talking about the situation of the Dalits. And Baba Ambedkar was so close to him that he liked his house in Kent, and he wrote. I'm going to show you one later where he says that one person from Bengal, Punjab would like to come and see your house. So and in reply to this, Churchill sent a cable. The Conservative Party will do everything to safeguard 6 crores untouchables. You see, that's the irony of the time. The Labour Party was to look after the interest of the scheduled caste. And Attlee and all, Baba Sahib was in touch with Attlee when he was the member, he was the opposition party leader. And he personally wrote to Baba Ambedkar, Clement Attlee, but something was not good with the Labour Party. And Baba Ambedkar has wrote to the Conservative. He said if Churchill would come to power, that would be easy for the untouchables. He will ensure that the rights are guaranteed to the scheduled caste. Now see, this is the telegraph that Baba Ambedkar received from Winston Churchill on 26 May 1946. You may be sure that the Conservative Party will do its utmost to protect the future of the 60 million untouchables, whose melancholy repression by their co-religionists constitute one of the gravest features in the problem of the Indian subcontinent. We shall take our stand on the broad principle set forth in the American Declaration of Independence, that all men are born free and equal and entitled to life of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Same phrase Baba Ambedkar has used afterwards. And you see, Baba Ambedkar has, later written a letter because, Churchill talked in the debate, and he talked very strongly in favor of the scheduled caste, very strongly in favor of the scheduled caste. But look at this response of the Brahmin Brahmaniya press. When this was happening, when Churchill and Baba Saheb Ambedkar was in communication, Ghanshyam Birla resorted to dirty comments on Baba Saheb Ambedkar through his newspaper leader under the title Ambedkar-Churchill Pact of 5th June 1946. And the entire Indian press, like today, it was very vitriolic towards Baba Saheb Ambedkar and the cause of the scheduled castes. So, when Baba Saheb Ambedkar found that the government is not listening, the Congress party was in the power after 1946. There was a direct action on the street, and 3 people died in Bombay, in Worli, and there was agitation in Pune because that was the capital. In one of the sessions in Bombay presidency, there was agitation, continuous agitation, but because there was no rationing. So Baba Saheb Ambedkar had to send batches of the people for satyagraha. And the historical fact is this, that Gandhi mocked the satyagraha. He said that this is a fake satyagraha. That's what Gandhi said. He's a very diabolic man. And there was this meeting in June 1946, and the Executive Council of AISCF declared the satyagraha by direct action. So there were 2. Baba Saheb Ambedkar was having a diplomacy there. He was and his lieutenant were having the satyagraha on the ground. Lucknow, Kanpur, everywhere there were big satyagrahas, and people were put in the jail. So, Baba Saheb Ambedkar was invited by Jogennath Mandal to contest the election from Bengal. Baba Saheb Ambedkar was not confident, was not sure. And what is Gandhi's chief tactics? Because there were the Anglo-Indian hordes, European hordes. Gandhi said that they cannot vote. This is all on the records. And Jogennath Mandal was the law minister in the Bengal government, and this is what happened in one night. Jogendra received call from Baba Saheb and told him that he would back off. He asked him, what is your opinion? Jogendranath Mandal requested Baba Ambedkar to stay in the race. And all India scheduled caste members, all the scheduled caste members were told by the Congress not to vote for Baba Ambedkar, but they did. The 5 of the Congress scheduled caste members voted for Baba Ambedkar, and that's how Baba Ambedkar got elected from the Bengal province. This thing. So I'm not going to go into much of this. I'm just going to show that Baba Ambedkar had to do a lot in order to he was against the Constituent Assembly, as I told you, but eventually he became the part of the Constituent Assembly, and he has done a lot when he went to England. They didn't sleep. Shivraj and Baba Sahib, they had worked so hard in London in 1946, working all the time, printing, meeting people of all all ideologies, and Clement Attlee, Patrick Lawrence, the India Minister, Templewood, Scarberry, and these some of the people like the MPs, they talked on the behalf of Baba Ambedkar. They talked about Baba Ambedkar in the British Parliament. So, this is what Baba Ambedkar did. He met many politicians from both the sides of Azal, Conservative and the Labour Party. And, there was a, rumor which was spread by one gentleman. His name is also there, who said that Baba Ambedkar will convert to Islam. And he said, Baba Ambedkar said in Karachi, when he was, flying to England, that if Congress and Gandhi do not give political freedom to the untouchables, they will revolt against political slavery and may ally with other religions. This is a very, very, this statement, and that's what Baba Ambedkar did. Then Baba Ambedkar had a personal meeting with Churchill in the November, and this is what they discussed, and as a result of that, the issues were raised. Baba Ambedkar also met Clement Attlee, and he promised that provisions will be made to safeguard the untouchables. It is not the kind of propaganda machine that is there to show that we were at the mercy of the Congress, and because of Gandhi, Baba Ambedkar had got into. These are all fake things. So there is a letter now which shows Edwina Mountbatten, which talks about congratulating Baba Ambedkar for his chairmanship of the drafting committee of the Constitution, and Mr. Valera has recommended your name. Mr. Valera, if you Google, he's an Irish gentleman. He was a constitutional expert, and he recommended Baba Sahib's name. And everyone is sure about your brilliance, and everyone from this country believes in your patriotism. And this is what she has written. So you see, these are all documents, and in the recent years, why I'm bringing this in, because in the recent year there are two arguments. One is from the Gandhian side. They say that the Indian constitution is not, it's westernized. It's not Indian in its core. And Baba Ambedkar was very vehemently opposed to anything that is of the backward thinking. Of the villages, he said villages are social, they are not economic. So the scheduled caste must be quarantined from the caste hindus and let them develop on their own, have their own settlements. And these were the arguments. But from the recent, when Baba Ambedkar died in 1960s, the Hindu fundamentalists like Rajendra Prasad, they were, they were playing a very different game. They were saying that it was B.N. Rao who is the architect of the Indian Constitution. I'm going to show you. He's a nobody. He's nothing, very meager. So you see, Baba Ambedkar, Rajendra Prasad, who was illiterate in the constitutional matters, made false claim lauding B.N. Rao when he claimed in 1960 that if Dr. Baba Ambedkar was the skillful pilot of the constitution through all different stages, Shri B.N. Rao was the person who visualized the plan and laid his foundations. Totally propagandist. And B. Shivrao, who edited B.N. Rao's book, India's Constitution, makes no mention of Baba Ambedkar. So all fraud, malicious propaganda. And who was B.N. Rao? Who was a draft man. He would wait the words. He was not somebody who had a legal acumen. And Baba Ambedkar's magnanimity, he thanked everybody. He thanked Congress Party, B.N. Rao, and everybody. And he did not play. B.N. Rao did not play any help. He was like secretarial assistant. He was like assistant to Baba Ambedkar. So this was his standing. He was to just wait, as I said, the legal documents. So this is what is about it. And what I just wanted to show you is this, that after the partition of British India, the Constituent Assembly began its real work when the drafting committee was constituted with Dr. Baba Ambedkar as the chairman on 29th August 1947, and the other 6 members were K.M. Munshi, Muhammad Sadullah, A.K. Iyer, G.S. Iyengar, Yan Madhav Rao, and T.T.K. Most of them were not at all involved in the drafting. There is the record, it's on the record that none of them had played any role in drafting the Constitution. Now keep this in your mind, okay? What I'm going to show you. So, except Dr. Babasaheb, the rest of the members did not play a substantial role in drafting the Constitution of India. Now, what happened? What is the role of B.N. Rao? B.N. Rao has submitted one note on 17 March 1947. And it was a 20 pages note, nothing new there, only rudimentary information about various constitutions as a questionnaire. And he asked people to report back. But only one member out of the 15 replied back to the B.N. Rao's questionnaire, and that's it. So, what Baba Ambedkar did, he prepared the draft of the Constitution. Now, the draft of the Constitution was submitted by Dr. Baba Ambedkar on 20th February 1948 to the President of the Constituent Assembly of India as mandated to him on 29th August 1947. You see, so it took long time to prepare the draft of the Constitution. And Baba Ambedkar was the member, was the chairman of the drafting committee. Now, what happened after that? In the forwarding letter to the draft constitution. Now keep in mind, Dr. Baba Ambedkar acknowledged assistant of B.N. Rao, S.N. Mukherjee, the joint secretary and draftman, and the staff of the Constituent Assembly secretary. There was a secretariat attached to Baba Ambedkar. It's a voluminous work. And Baba Ambedkar already acknowledged the members of the drafting committee. None of them played any role, as we have seen, and single-handedly drafted the Constitution of India with the secretarial help. There was a help, you need the secretarial help. Now, when the draft constitution was submitted, the story of the drafting didn't end there. On 21st February 1948, for 8 months, there was a debate. There was, the document was open for the public to comment on. And then, as we know, that after 8 months, the Constituent Assembly debates took place on the various article by article. And Baba Ambedkar was there responding to every single article. So, he's not only the framer, but he's the architect of the Constitution. There is no doubt about that. Whatever the propagandist says, the history is saying, is the objective history is different. So we offer here the propaganda from the certain quarters. Hindu affiliate B.N. Rao wrote the Constitution. Where is B.N. Rao here? There's nowhere. And he was just a Babu, a secretary to the Constituent Assembly. There's no more than that. And it was Baba Saheb Ambedkar who gave his sweat and blood to the making, drafting, piloting, planning, and debating the Constitution of India. So now I'm going to, this just how, the Constitution, the history of the Constitution after 1940 is very interesting, just like a movie, and you see, this is filled with ups and downs. And this is what Baba Saheb Ambedkar told to Dr. Nimgade. After that famous statement that I will burn the Constitution, I was just a hack. After that, Baba Saheb Ambedkar made the statement to Nimgade, and this is his ultimate testimony. What he says: his health has completely gone down. He says, this is because I disregarded the laws of nature, and that is why it has punished me like this. Darwin's theory tells that if anything living or dead is used excessively, then it results into ill effects. Baba Saheb Ambedkar brings Darwin. And he says, once upon a time, my health was as strong as a rock. But during the days of writing the Constitution, sometimes I would spend 20 hours a day sitting near a table. As a result of that, I lost the strength in my legs. I did not take adequate care of my health at the time. The muscles of my legs did not get sufficient exercise and also the necessary movement. Thanks to my practice of continuously sitting at one place during those days, I gave all my heart, soul, and focused all my energy on the cause of writing such a comprehensive and yet accurate constitution. This is what Baba Saheb Ambedkar says. Comprehensive, and we are going to see how comprehensive and accurate constitution. This is a beautiful testimony by Baba Saheb Ambedkar. And he says, and this is what strikes at the merit of this so-called caste truth. If I wouldn't have done this, Baba Sahib says, their forefathers also would not have achieved anywhere near to what I have accomplished. I translated it from Marathi. He says, त्यांच्या बाप दादांना पण जमलं नसतं कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन लिहिणं, घटना लिखना, संविधान लिखना उनके बाप दादाओं को भी जमा नहीं रहता, उनको भी वो पॉसिबल नहीं था. ये काम मैंने करके रखा है. So you see, when we are talking about the beginning of the Constitution and the growth of Constitution, you see how interesting is the journey. What Baba Ambedkar did, what is meant by the Constitution. It has to be constituted by the people. You have seen how, Baba Ambedkar had played a role in the constitutional history of India. Of course, we cannot do it in one session, but all those people who can be interested in that, they are free to look into the documents and they will find the ample content for them to realize the importance of, the constitutional history of India and, the role of Baba Ambedkar therein. And I think this is enough for today. When we advance in the course of our sessions, I'm going to bring in more principles alive. And I'm going to talk more about democracy, the principle of democracy, the principle of federalism, the principle of what is called the separation of power. And we will go into depth of all these principles that Baba Ambedkar had so brilliantly articulated. So I will stop here and I will open the class for any discussion, any comments by any of you.
So now it is confirmed that it was Britishers who recommended Dr. Ambedkar's name for drafting committee chairman.
See, actually, there is a lot to be explored because, I showed you that there are the, debates in the British Parliament where Churchill is so, strongly recommending that the Constitution cannot come into existence if the minorities are not taken into consideration.
But now, after reading Indian books, 7, 8, Sardar Patel wrote letter to B.G. Kher, and B.G. Kher, then Jayakar resigned, then his seat was given like this.
Because there was a, if he was not to be included in the drafting of the Constitution couldn't come into play, no. The Constitution couldn't come into play, but that was the force of Baba Saheb Ambedkar's, advocacy.
He
got a place for himself.
Because this Edwina Mountbatten's letter is the latest new thing, I think.
Yeah,
this has not, it was never seen earlier.
You can look into the parliamentary debates, and there is an Independent India Act of 1947, and it was debated in the British Parliament, and they all talked about the safeguards for the minorities. All talked about the safeguards for the minorities. They said we cannot just keep it in the hands of the Congress.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Welcome. So anybody wants to comment or say anything?
Okay. Hello, this is Prandeep.
Yeah, Prandeep.
So, okay, I just want to say that if Britishers thought so much about the untouchables, according to Hindu social order, which was prevalent, especially in Maharashtra, because I did pursue the course on Ambedkar, there I read about Hindu social order. But the plight underlying the condition of the Hindu social order prevalent during that time, I don't think so. It is same throughout the country, because I belong to like Northeast India's Assamese community. I didn't see such sort of Hindu social order in our society where the untouchables are kept at the southernmost part or the ending of the villages, whether it is the western side or the southern side, and they are just relegated to the outside of the villages.
Yes.
And they were treated like very in a bad situation.
Prandeep.
But if yes.
Prandeep,
So if I say the equivalency of mistreatment or like very bad treatment of untouchable throughout the union of the whole country is not same. You can't say the scheduled castes of West Bengal or Northeast India are similar with the scheduled castes of Maharashtra or Western India.
Right.
Because there are many scheduled, there are many scheduled castes.
I don't want to go into that details. I just want to tell you that the British policy was that of non-interference. But, the British instituted the rule of law in this country, the diocese rule of law. Now, they didn't interfere into the social, society, Indian society. But they did something else based on the rule of law. Now, their position changed from time to time. And in 1935, they accepted the scheduled caste as the minority all over India. It's not just about Maharashtra or Bengal or whatever. So their position changed in 1946, and the Labour Party was in such a haste to hand over the power to the Indians that a lot of questions were not, resolved, particularly how the Pakistan question will be resolved, how the question of the scheduled caste will be resolved. They didn't do that. So it is not that, the British were the friends of the scheduled caste. Baba Sahib Ambedkar made it a point. Baba Sahib told him that because of you, because of us, you are in the power. He said that the Dusas in the Plassey fought on the behalf of the British government, and that's how you got the power. The same happened in the Bhima Koregaon. They just the British were betrayed. British betrayed the untouchables throughout India. They didn't give us anything. They could have done so much because they owed us so much throughout India, but they didn't do anything.
The main thing is plight of untouchable throughout the country is not similar. You cannot make it equivalent. That's like the focus more on the scheduled caste of Maharashtra. It was basically focused more on scheduled caste of Maharashtra. It was not focused on scheduled caste of Punjab or scheduled caste of Tamil Nadu or scheduled caste of
I don't understand your point. How does that relate to what we are discussing? I don't understand what you want to say, Sandeep.
You are just generalizing scheduled caste.
No,
and the Britishers who made the policies and like nominated like B.R. Ambedkar. It is very good.
Sandeep, just bear in mind that, there was a All India Scheduled Caste Federation, and the substantial people from Bengal were represented. There was a Bengal Scheduled Caste Federation. There was a UP Scheduled Caste Federation. There was a CP Berar Scheduled Caste Federation. Isn't it? When the convention was held first time, 75,000
What about the Northeast India? That is also a question now. Why there is no All India Northeast Scheduled Caste Federation?
From Assam also there, but
from Assam
you are
also
making a different point.
It was not such a pathetic situation as it was portrayed in the courses or the textbooks.
I don't know what you want to say. Okay, anyway, this doesn't pertain to the discussion. So, any other thing on what we have discussed?
Hi, Jai Bhim sir.
Yes, Sushil.
This is Sushil. मैं एक सवाल पूछने वाला था, मतलब अपार्ट फ्रॉम दिस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, जो आपने एक पॉइंट कहा था, आपने जो सेपरेट सेटलमेंट जो आपने
यस,
एग्जांपल दिया था,
गुड पॉइंट। हाँ,
तो वो 1947 के दरमियान की सिचुएशन, तो मतलब वो समझ में आता है कि थोड़ा सा हम अगर उस टाइम की सिनेरियो को देखें, लेकिन अभी की कॉन्टेक्स्ट में सर, मतलब क्या लगता है कि मतलब अगर उस टाइम पे, चलो मैं मान लेता हूँ कि उस टाइम पे होता तो दैट कुड बी बेटर, लेकिन अभी आफ्टर द इंडिपेंडेंस अभी क्या लगता है कि मतलब जस्ट एक थॉट में जानने की
क्या
कोशिश
है
कर रहा हूँ।
कि इसमें सुशील जी जो है वो विलेज स्ट्रक्चर को समझना पड़ेगा। सेपरेट सेटलमेंट सिटी के लिए नहीं है। विलेजेस में जो दलित और ट्राइबल्स रहते हैं वो दे आर एट द मर्सी ऑफ द अपर कास्ट इवन टुडे।
हम्म।
ओके, तो जो विलेज है वो सोशल है, इकोनॉमिक उसमें कोई इफिशिएंसी नहीं है विलेजेस में। तो बाबा साहब का ये कहना था कि जैसे साउथ अफ्रीका में बांटू के साथ हुआ, उनको सेपरेट दे दिया। जैसे अमेरिका में भी जो ये थे एबोरिजिन,
करेक्ट करेक्ट करेक्ट।
उनके लिए रिजर्वेशन थी।
हम्म।
राइट, जो लास वेगास में जो इतने बड़े बड़े जो बड़े बने चीजें, उनकी ओनरशिप आज भी जो है वो उनके पास है। ठीक है, ऑयल फील्ड की जो ये है उनके पास है। तो भैया इंडिया बहुत बड़ा देश था, आज भी है, बहुत सारी खाली लैंड पड़ी है। तो बाबा साहब ने बहुत साझा प्रपोजल दिया था कि भैया ये विलेज में जो अत्याचार होता है हमारे ऊपर, उसको ये करने के लिए हमको सेपरेट करो, हम अपना इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट करेंगे, आपके साथ इकोनॉमिक ट्रांजैक्शन करेंगे, क्योंकि सोशल ट्रांजैक्शन जब होता है तब आप हमको स्लेव के समान ट्रीट करते हैं।
करेक्ट करेक्ट।
है ना? तो ऐसे ये तो कभी भी पॉसिबल है। आज भी गवर्नमेंट जो है लैंड एक्वायर करके दे सकता है, वैसा कुछ नहीं है। अगर स्टेट ने डिसाइड किया तो कुछ भी कर सकती है। तो ऐसा नहीं है कि प्रैक्टिकल है या नहीं है, विल क्या है आपको। जैसे जॉइंट इलेक्टोरेट है, जॉइंट इलेक्टोरेट में जो होते हैं स्टूजेस और ये पैदा होते हैं।
Sir,
यस।
sir,
सो
sir, in today's context, in order to send the true representative of scheduled castes or scheduled tribes, can we raise a demand for separate electorate now?
सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट का डिमांड तब भी वैलिड था, आज भी वैलिड है, क्योंकि इट्स अबाउट द गिविंग ट्रू रिप्रेजेंटेशन टू दी, इट्स गिविंग द ट्रू रिप्रेजेंटेशन टू द व्हाट इज कॉल्ड दी कम्युनिटी। जो अभी मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट्स है,
Yeah.
दो एमएलएज है, आर दे टू रिप्रेजेंटेटिव ऑफ द कम्युनिटी? नो, दे आर नॉट।
No.
So we can make the demand, or we can make the demand for the electoral change as to how, the proportional representation. There are many ways Baba Ambedkar has talked about as to how the communities can be represented,
Okay.
isn't it? So, we need a true, the separate electorate was for the Muslims and the Sikhs, and Baba Ambedkar was asking for the separate electorate, and he was asking for only 10 years.
Yeah.
So that, there will be a separate budget, there will be a separate, way of, dealing with the economic interest, the civil interest of the scheduled castes.
Thank you.
Anything else before we conclude for today?
Hi, hi, Jai Bhim. I'm Preetham.
Yes, Preetham.
So I have some suggestions for you.
Yeah.
So before starting the session, you got time like 2 days. So you can share the some relevant study material after before starting the session.
I
Then
already
maybe
did. I submitted a short note. I don't know whether you have gone through it, but I study. I sent an introduction in the group, in the Ambedkar Economics group, and I will
yeah,
keep on sending.
yeah, you did. And I also would love if you add citations in the slides. That would
Yes,
be so great.
yes. I show you this book, and this is enough. And anything I have said is all included there with the dates, right? See this book. I'll send the reference
So,
of this book. Okay.
okay,
In the
thank you.
PowerPoint presentation, you cannot give references like that. It will just clutter the slides, right?
Yeah, you can give it in the last page, I guess, or just say the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or I can give you the books. You can do it for yourself, right?
Yeah, thank you.
So anything else, or should we conclude for today?
Sir, there's a question in the chat box that so Samyak asked that as we know, according to new research, John Dewey left a deep impression on Baba Saheb. So
Yes.
let me know, can we see any ideas from Dewey's philosophy in the Constitution?
That will come as democracy, but the democracy was such a generalized concept, and he got a lot of ideas from John Dewey when it came to democracy, and Baba Ambedkar has developed his own ideas further that we are going to look at in the upcoming session. Okay, so should we end our class here today's session here? If you have any pressing questions, we can always go back to the groups, and that's it. In these classes, I would like to be focused. I don't want to discuss any extra things because there is only what we can do in 1 hour session. So if you have anything related to the content of the the session, let's just focus on that. Okay.
Hello, Mangesh ji, Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim ji,
Can you
बोलिए.
hear me?
Yeah.
I want to ask whether I don't know whether you have covered this point in today's session or not. I want to ask you that what were Dr. Baba Saheb's references while constituting these SC/ST laws, SC/ST articles?
I think he has been studying them for a long time. There are a lot of references from 1917 onwards, South Borough Commission report, and maybe one day we will look at that. But he has always been thinking about it. So there are
So,
there is no reference for that.
yes.
He has derived a lot of things from his own thinking, because he was a sociologist. He was a political scientist. He was a field worker, and he has a lot of information to formulate his own concepts and acts.
Okay.
So thank you so much for joining in today, and we will meet next Thursday, 7 o'clock, with much more exciting session, and see you then. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.